I'd love a little show of hands, please, for people who've heard of the term Web3. Okay, cool. And who's used Web3? Okay, that's good. I'm really pleased. And there's a lot of people without their hands up. That makes sense. It's still pretty experimental. The purpose of my talk today is to illuminate this topic a little bit for you and hopefully encourage some of you to explore this in a bit of detail. So why is Web3 important? Let's go back to the dawn of the publicly available internet, right? Right at the beginning, in like early to mid-90s, there was loads of skepticism. People didn't understand what the use cases would be. They asked, why do we need it? What's it good for? And you have to remember as well, at that time, there was like massive outcry at the proliferation of pornography, illegal file sharing services like Napster, and new malicious activities such as hacks and viruses. We're coming up on 30 years now since pundits first asked the question, what is the internet good for? And for better or for worse, we now can't imagine our lives without it. We're at the dawn of a new internet revolution, Web3. Web3 is going to change the way that we interact with digital products and even change the ways that we collaborate together. Of course, there's lots of skepticism. Why do we need Web3? What's it good for? If you're skeptical too, I don't blame you. You've got the rising and falling price of Bitcoin, hacks and scams, outrageous fortunes made from buying JPEG images, and of course the environmental impact of mining cryptocurrency. My talk today is trying to help you look beyond those surface level topics and lift the curtain on what's really going on in Web3 to demonstrate how transformative this technology is going to be, and also demonstrate how UX research has a unique role in its success. My name is Georgia Rakusen. I'm a user researcher and I specialize in the Web3 space, helping product teams understand their users and build better experiences. So we should probably begin with a definition, right? What is Web3? So let's go back to Web 1. The early internet was mostly a read-only experiences. Websites kind of behaved like magazines, rich with information, but you couldn't really do much with them. You certainly didn't like and subscribe. In Web 1, users were consumers. Web 2 is the interactive web. It's the web that you and I use every day. Think of user-generated content, social media, personalization, the ad revenue model. In Web 2, users are the product. Web 3 is a reimagining of this data-hungry Web 2 model that moves users from being the product to the owners. And Web 3 uses blockchain technology to decentralize the web. So this means rather than like one central authority or power having control over data and how it's used, the roles and responsibilities are dispersed. And it uses cryptocurrency as well. These tokens allow people to be part owners in the products that they use. They can have voting rights on how these products behave and even earn money for using them. I'm going to give you a quick tour through some of the use cases that are emerging in the Web3 space now. And I'm not casting judgment on whether these are the right use cases or not, but I want you to pay attention to how the technology itself creates something which is structurally different from what we have now. The first use case is financial services. Our financial service systems are dated and bloated. Decentralized finance, or DeFi as it's known, is where you take away the profit-making middlemen, the banks, financial service providers, and replace them with a few lines of code. This makes money systems much faster and cheaper for the end user. You can earn really high savings, interest rates on your savings in DeFi, make instant and practically free transactions to anyone in the world, and you can even get credit cards now to spend your crypto. Next up, your digital identity. Right now in Web 2, centralized companies or these big tech companies own and use your data. In Web 3, the user will be responsible for their own data in a digital identity wallet. And this wallet will contain not just your name and contact details and your financial information, but also your diploma certificates, perhaps other credentials you might have, like your eBay rating, or even your medical records. With this kind of technology, the user is responsible for their data, they own it, and they can even monetize it if they want. Web3 allows for proof of ownership. Now, if you've heard of NFTs, it's a bit of a taboo subject, you know, these really expensive images that people trade online and make a lot of money or lose a lot of money with them. And I think that's a distraction from what this technology is really about. So the current use of NFTs for trading images is really just the tip of the iceberg for this technology. When you can, so NFT really is about proof of ownership. And when you can prove where something came from and who owns it now, pretty cool things are possible. I want you to imagine an artist automatically receiving royalties every time a piece of their work is resold on a secondary market. Imagine event tickets which are programmed to prevent ticket touts from scalping them. Or imagine buying a track of your favorite artist, and because there's proof that you own the track, you're automatically entered into like pre-sale tickets for their live shows or something like that. So proof of ownership starts to create new revenue models for artists and new experiences and closer relationships between the artist and the fan themselves. And the last use case I want to talk about is changing the way that businesses work. We've heard a lot already today about hierarchical companies, the position of UX research in those companies as well. Well, with this new technology is a new type of company structure emerging. It's called a decentralized autonomous organization, or a DAO. So DAOs are very flat organizations. There's actually no central authority. And in this structure, they're really easily scalable. Everybody who's a part of the organization can have a right in how it works. They use voting mechanisms to make decisions, and they're owners of this organization. So when you take out the middlemen, you could say the managerial middlemen in an organization, some really interesting collaboration opportunities are possible. Now, there are currently products and services that address all of these use cases right now, but it's fair to say that the industry is definitely in its infancy and things are quite experimental. However, that said, this technology will be a part of everybody's life here someday soon. So it won't be a surprise to anybody that an emerging technology has some UX challenges, and it's said that UX is actually the single biggest blocker to Web3 adoption. So what are these UX problems and why are they here? The first issue is that Web3 is a developer-centric ecosystem where like code is law, and I think might be controversial, engineers are given such a lofty status that people build whatever they can, not just because they should build something. And there's a lot of money in the space. When a project earns hundreds of millions of dollars upfront before they've built anything, it's pretty hard to see why they would have the impetus to build something that brings value to users right off the starting line. And UX maturity is low, like really low. It's a bit like working in Web 1 again, where a group of people around a board table just ask each other, well, what do users want? And the problem with this board table is it's going to be engineers and finance specialists. It's not going to be product designers and UX researchers. In fact, it's often the case that a product team has no designer attached to them at all. So if they don't have a designer, what do you think that means for UX research? Some teams have never even heard of it before. So what does all this mean for UX research in the space? Well, UX is an afterthought, and that means that it's really challenging for product designers to build useful and usable experiences on top of a system that just wasn't designed with a real human in mind. And learning by doing is the best way to get to grips in Web3. If you're new, you're going to experience a really steep learning curve, loads of really complicated terminology, ways of doing things that feel really counterintuitive as well. And it costs money to learn. So you can't just open a browser tab and start using Web3. You're going to have to acquire some cryptocurrency first. This is a problem. And this all means that using Web3 is risky. Because it's the user's responsibility, the things that they do, but it's confusing, so there's high chance of human error, this means that people can lose their money. Another issue with this is that there is no central authority that's responsible for anything, so if you make a mistake, you can't just call someone up. I want you to consider the cognitive load as a user seeing this when you're trying to make an irreversible transaction. Okay, you're just sending some money to somebody or interacting with a website. Now, this is pretty complicated for somebody who's new in the space, and quite complicated sometimes for people who are not new in the space. But if you wanted to press on data here, maybe you wanted more information, you'd see something like this. And this isn't a product design issue, this is a systems issue. So now that the industry is moving out of its experimental infancy and starting to wake up to the fact that it needs user research, it needs to know this stuff about its users, this activity is beginning to pick up, and there are more people doing this work now. So I get asked quite often, what is it like being a UX researcher in Web3? Well, I get to learn all the time. It's a really interesting space, very fast moving, and I'm constantly exposed to cutting-edge ideas. And once companies actually experience, robust research, like they deeply value it. And this is because there's so little information about users in the space, partly by design. One of the core ethos of Web3 is user privacy. And that means that, these companies, they don't want to be like data-hungry Web2 companies, so often they collect absolutely no data about their users at all. There might be blockchain data, like what transactions were made and when, but not by who, where, or why. So seeing teams receive research and eat it up is incredibly validating as a researcher. And the types of questions I get asked to answer are, who are our users? What are they doing in Web3? What should our product do to meet their needs? Or how is our product meeting their needs? What are the tactical and strategic changes that we should make? So everyone here in this room will know that that's basic UX research questions. And this means that your user interviews, your usability testing, your card sorts, your conjoint analysis, your quant surveys, all of these tools are perfectly suited to answering the questions in Web3. To add a little bit of flavor, I'm just going to talk about 3 quick projects which I've worked on. So I work with the fantastic team at MetaMask, which is a Web3 wallet. It has 30 million monthly users, so it's one of the most popular ones in the space. And they wanted to understand the jobs to be done and thinking styles of their existing users. Interviewed 35 people, we worked together on the analysis, and that's helped the product team, build their strategic roadmap. Rarible is an NFT marketplace. It connects artists with collectors, and they wanted to understand how do these 2 groups make decisions, and how does our platform compare to the competition? So, not a very complex research need, but something absolutely vital to them as well. So the outcomes were some tactical UX improvements they could make and better understanding their users for things like product marketing as well. And the last one I'll talk about is Yearn Finance. So Yearn is a DeFi application. You can deposit your cryptocurrency and earn returns on it. Interestingly, this company is a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization. So they operate as a very flat organization. And I was just asked to perform some usability testing for them to understand how the new designs that they've implemented improved the experience for users. So though UX research in Web3 is very similar to Web2, I want to point out a few unusual nuances and quirks about working in the space. So because users are owners of the products they use, they are invested literally in the product development process. And they have a lot of power, a lot of sway over what gets built. And you'll find product teams designing their product based on what their community says they want and listening to the loudest person's opinion. And we all know that that is not robust data gathering. Because Web3 is like a small, well, new-ish ecosystem, you might expect that users are quite hard to find for recruitment, but actually it's pretty easy. They're really, really vocal online. You can find them very easily if you go to where they are, but they might be anonymous. So, and often I am interviewing somebody whose real name and face I never find out. In that scenario, I always have my video on when I'm doing interviews. I don't think it's possible or right to expect someone who's that privacy conscious to trust me and give me the information that I want to know about them. So I forego my privacy in order to respect the own privacy of the user. I would say that's only about 10% of the sessions that I run, but still a marked amount. Even some of my clients are anonymous. So if you scan the QR code here, I have created a page of resources to help people who haven't taken the leap yet try out some Web3 things. And my hope is that some people here will be motivated to look towards this field and consider it as something that they want to work in. Do you need to know about Web3 in order to be a UX researcher in the space? Well, a little naivety is a good thing in a researcher. But I believe that to work in this field, you must have some practical information. This is a lot to do with the terminology that's used, the experiences, the culture that exists in the Web3 space. And you need to speak the language of stakeholders. They're much more likely to listen to the outcomes of the research if you meet them where they are. You need to be a great communicator in the space as well. That's really, really important in a world where there's just all this, it's very engineering centric, so good communicators can make a really big difference. It's not enough just to do some research and report the data. You need to help the client understand the value of UX research, know what questions they should be asking, and know what to do with the information that they get, because, like I said, the UX maturity is so low, they really need hand-holding through this process. But you don't need to know everything. You don't need to have tried everything out. I haven't. I learned a long time ago that that is impossible, and there's no point in trying to be an expert in all use cases. Just pick a lane, something that you're interested in, and use it. Try and get to know about it. But that said, you can be a skeptic. And I think that it's actually vital in this industry that we have people who are practical, pragmatists, realists, people who can give these product teams a reality check on what's really going on for users in the space. There are some really exciting questions, big questions to answer that have not been answered yet. And these are some of them. Why and how will the next billion people onboard into Web3? How should the future of money be designed? How might we improve the usability of wallets and applications? What killer use case will Web3 solve for? And how do we ensure products are built in an inclusive and equitable way? We need bridge builders in the space. These are people who understand humans and can point these product teams into solving for their needs. And that's why Web3 needs you. And Web3 means not having to play by the old rules either. There's nothing stopping a UX researcher from identifying an opportunity in the space and founding a startup to build a solution for that. We're uniquely positioned to do so, right? These innate problems that people have, where we're there at the coalface listening to users all the time. We don't need to work in full-time roles in traditional hierarchical organizations where we sit low down the pecking order and are instructed on what to investigate. Today I want to launch the User Research DAO. This is a collective of UX researchers working in the space, working together to tackle some of the biggest research questions in the Web3 ecosystem. This will be a community of practitioners where we share knowledge and resources, but we have the autonomy to work on the problems and products that most inspire us. We'll be increasing the quality and quantity of user research in the space by delivering training, mentoring, and other resources. And as well as working for private companies, we will be doing publicly available research, working with funders to address some of the most interesting questions in the space. This research will be applicable to many product teams, and it's going to elevate the quality of user experience. The DAO is in its infancy, right? It's being shaped, it's experimental too. But I hope that it will act as a bridge between the UX research profession and the myriad opportunities that exist to help shape the future of the internet. If this excites you, please come and get involved. Thank you.